The Chargers did not wait long to dip back into free agency after the draft, bringing in free agent wide receiver DJ Chark, now adding him into a suddenly crowded wide receiver room.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together now for 8 seasons, but this is our 6th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen, and to make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Daniel, it was only yesterday we were talking about how young the Chargers wide receiver room is, and the Chargers said, okay, let me go add a veteran. So they went and grabbed DJ Chark, and are they done making moves? Is that the last move they're going to make? And it's definitely nice to have Joe Hortiz as the general manager after several puzzling drafts from Tom Telesco.
Yeah, it was great to get a question from our brothers over at the Chargers Chat podcast, but a lot of good stuff to get into today. But today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play. David, we literally talked about this yesterday. You know, we had a buy or sell. Will the Chargers add another free agent wide receiver? And with the interest they were showing in multiple guys, we said, yeah, they probably will, even with a very crowded room. And they do. They go get DJ Chark. And I know that's probably not a name that's going to blow fans away by any means. It's not Odell Beckham Jr., right, or a flashy name, anything like that. But it's easy to see why they did it. We talked about it. A really, really young wide receiver room right now. You get a veteran who has some time under his belt in the league, someone that can come in and play that X receiver for you. And maybe there's not a ton of those on the roster right now. A guy who can play outside, has the size at 6'2", long arms, big hands to do all of those things. And I like it from that standpoint, right? You kind of needed a veteran in this room. He comes in with some proven experience, proven production at the NFL level, something we were talking about. Really, no one outside of Josh Palmer has at this level. So I like the move from that standpoint. As far as what the production you're going to get out of him, it's kind of hard to say at this point. But I like the move of at least bringing in more competition, bringing in a veteran into that young room.
That's what I wanted, Daniel. That's what I wanted to see. It just was a very young room with not a lot of experience in the NFL. So I wanted to see them bring somebody in even for the sake of competition. Bring somebody in who's been there, who's done that. And it does not hurt that he is a 4.3 40 speed guy. I mean, this guy has real speed. I mean, he can go stretch the field, no question about it. I mean, even last year playing with a rookie quarterback, he averaged 15 yards per reception.
Yeah, no, I mean, he definitely brings that to the table, and I think that's a theme we've seen from this new regime as far as this wide receiving core. I mean, if you look at Lab McConkey, plus athlete. You look at Cornelius Johnson, a plus athlete. DJ Chark, another plus athlete. And that's something we kind of begged for a long time, right? It was a group that was getting slower as they got older and never really a super kind of explosive speed group before that, when your mainstays and kind of your stalwarts there were Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. That just wasn't what their bread and butter was, right? But as a guy who had 75% of his snaps on the outside last year, I mean, I think we know that Josh Palmer can play on the outside and be that X guy. And the X receiver is basically what Mike Williams was, right? Big, tall, long arms, guy that can defeat press coverage, all of those things on the outside. Josh Palmer can do that, 6'1", 6'2". Quentin Johnston, you would think could do that, but really struggled in doing that last year. Maybe isn't the best use for him. And then you have Lad McConkey, who's more of the Z receiver, the other guy, in football terms, as far as the guy opposite of who the X receiver is. And then you have a couple of guys who profile as that you took at the end of the draft with Brendan Rice and Cornelius Johnson, but obviously very hard to know what that production is going to look like in their first year. But one of the things that, I thought of immediately was the best quarterback that DJ Chark has ever played with, right? I mean, we're talking about a guy who played with Blake Bortles and rookie Trevor Lawrence and Jared Goff and rookie Bryce Young. Like, this is someone that definitely is going to have a step up in the quarterback department, so it's exciting from that aspect. At the same time, I think you're hoping on another bounce back from a veteran. And the Chargers, one interesting kind of side note from their free agency class so far, going with a lot of Panthers, right? Going with a lot of guys from the worst team in the league last year, whether Bradley Bozeman or Hayden Hurst or DJ Chark. But I think the nice part of that is okay, well, it's hard to imagine it could get any worse than what that situation was last year in Carolina, where the owner's throwing beer on people from his suite. So, like, hard to kind of hold that against these guys, but it wasn't an impressive season for him. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. I mean, if the advanced analytics don't really favor what DJ Chark did last year, right? Out of 70 receivers with 60 or more targets, he ranked 61st in yards per route run. Basically, every route that he runs, how many yards he's getting out of that, 61 out of 70. He was 66th in yards after the catch per catch. So not a yak guy, I think you could say. And out of everyone that had at least 60 targets, the second highest drop percentage, right? Needs much better ball security, 5 drops and 2 fumbles last year. So that has to be a lot better. I think it helps, that he only had 1 career fumble before that in his previous 5 seasons. But still, David, I mean, they are going to need a bounce back from this guy to really hope that he can live up to his contract, which according to Ian Rappaport is up to $5 million. So we'll see how much of that is incentives.
Yeah. Also, like, according to Arjun Manan, was the 4th worst wide receiver last year in separating. So that's not something that you exactly like.
Especially because on that same chart, David, the Chargers actually had someone that was worse than that.
And that guy's name is Quentin Johnston. Yes, of course.
Who was second.
Yeah, so having 2 of those receivers in the same wide receiver room is definitely not what you like to see. But also, I think it comes with the context of playing with the quarterback who was absolutely abused last year. He got sacked and amazing. And I mean, I had to do a double take when I looked at this. 62 times last year, which is absolutely incredible. Justin Herbert is a lot better at avoiding sacks, also much more difficult to bring down to the ground. So I don't think that he's going to be in that same situation, and hopefully has much better protection this year. But this is another veteran player that the Chargers are kind of buying low on and trying to see if he, with a new fresh start, with a new quarterback and a new offense, can bounce back. Because, I mean, this is a guy who does have a 1,000-yard receiving season under his belt, albeit a couple of seasons ago.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. He had 1,000 yards plus or a little more than that in 2019, and he hasn't surpassed 706 yards since then, right? So it's been a while since we've seen him have really good production. I think if you're looking for the positives as far as stats go, I think last year the same metrics, right, out of receivers with 60 or more targets, that's 70 dudes in the NFL last year. He was 6th in contested catch percentage and 15th in passer rating when targeted, right? When he was throwing the ball, for the most part, good things happen, and that's including all the drops that he had as well. So I think those are the
9 receptions of 20-plus yards as well last year. So that's pretty good, too.
That's what his bread and butter is. I think the thing is trying to build that rapport with Justin Herbert where he's not a guy that can separate well, and can he gain the trust that even if he isn't open, that Justin Herbert should still throw him the ball. I mean, 58% on contested catches is really, really good. I mean, 6th in the NFL last year. But now, David, the interesting thing is after having it be one of the biggest needs going into the season, now it's a super crowded wide receiver room. I mean, it's a total of 11 guys, but not including the undrafted free agents. You have Josh Palmer, Quentin Johnston, Darius Davis, Simi Fehoko, DJ Chark, Ladd McConkey, Brendan Rice, and Cornelius Johnson. And I think the main takeaway here is like, what a heated battle this is going to be in training camp, which I think is great news for the Chargers.
It is. Competition allows everybody to rise to the top, right? The cream is going to rise to the top. We're going to see who is going to be the best, 6 or 7 wide receivers, depending on how many they keep on the roster. But I firmly believe under this coaching staff, under this regime, we are going to have the best players on the field, regardless of when they were drafted or whether they were signed. I feel like, with Coach Harbaugh, he is going to make sure that the best 53 players are going to be the players that make this team.
I think the other nice thing here, too, is just like you're not really assuming anyone is going to do anything, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not just assuming Quentin Johnston's going to make this huge leap in year 2. You're not just assuming that one of your 7th-round picks is going to be able to come in and have meaningful playing time if someone gets injured this year, right? So I think it's just not betting on, hey, okay, something we haven't seen before, because in that room, there's not a lot that we have seen before. So I think it's great. You're not just kind of resting on, Quentin Johnston's going to be much better this year. Josh Palmer's going to stay extremely healthy this year. It's like, hey, we're going to have a bunch of guys here and let them battle it out. So
fight it out. Let's go.
On its own, DJ Chark, kind of whatever move as far as production-wise, I think he could be better than he was last year with the Panthers. But I think overall, the competition in that wide receiver room is something to be optimistic about. But we still have more to get into because it is a Fan Mail Friday, and we had some big news to start it. But we have some great questions, including, will we see another bigger move from the Chargers in free agency? And if they do make a move, what positions will they target, and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, I need to tell you guys about FanDuel because it's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. And I know it's not football season, right? So that part sucks unless you're a big UFL fan. But the best way to have something matter more, to be more interesting, if you're not a football fan, not a basketball or NHL or baseball fan, is to have some action on it. All of a sudden, it feels like it's NFL Sunday. But if you guys want to bet on the playoffs, they also have their most popular parlays, so you can get in on tonight's action with the Clippers and Mavericks. You can go with Kyrie Irving to get 4+ assists, Paul George to get 25+ points and 4 more rebounds, to go along with Luka Doncic going for 30+, and James Harden to get 4+ rebounds. If they do that, you can get those odds at plus 430. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, David, well, let's get into Fan Mail Friday, and we had to bump some questions, obviously, a tier. So sorry we weren't able to get to your voicemail day. I promise we'll get you next week if you send one in. But we have a lot of good ones still to get into, including this one from Edgar S., who's saying, do we think the Chargers have made their biggest offseason pickup already? Or do we think it is still yet to come after seeing what was accomplished in the draft? David, what do you think?
As far as the big moves are concerned, I think they're done making big moves. I do think that they will continue to make supplementary moves all the way through the offseason because that's what Joe Hortiz has said that he's going to do. Him and Jim Harbaugh have said on multiple occasions there are several months between now and when they kick the ball off in September. So there is a lot of time and there's a lot of things that could happen. So you have to be open to making moves and adding to your football team. I don't think that they're going to make any more splash moves. I think those are done. But the supplementary moves, I can definitely see several of those happening.
Tell me this. What's the splash move they have made, right? I mean, I don't know if they've really made a big signing at all. And I think that's kind of been the theme of Joe Hortiz's first free agency class. It's just like, there's a lot of dudes who have proven production, right, and have been good players in this league. The Gus Edwards, the J.K. Dobbins, the Bradley Bosemans, the
Will Disley.
Hursts. Will Disley, I mean, nobody was saying, like, man, if my team can just bring in Will Disley this year, that is going to be the splash move that, we're all waiting for. There's no J.C. Jacksons, right? There's no Brian Bulagas or Chris Harris Jr.'s or Orlando Franklins. And we're looking at it as a good thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are some decently big names out there, right? The Stephon Gilmores. Justin Simmons is still out there. Adoree Jackson, Xavier Howard, Calais Campbell. So, like, there's some big names, and I don't think that they're done in free agency by any means. But, like, they didn't even bring someone like Odell Beckham in for a visit, right? Obviously wanted a wide receiver and weren't interested in him, and that is with a regime that has a ton of Ravens coaches that had him on the team last year. So maybe that's just a personal preference from them, but, like, we haven't seen them actually target any big names. Like, is Tyler Boyd a big name? He was brought in, not really.
I wouldn't say
there
so.
There are some splashy names out there. Hey, if they go sign Justin Simmons, that'd be freaking awesome. I think we'd all love that. And I think the nice thing is, more than anything, is that Joe Hortiz has put them in a spot where they can be players. In
they
this
can.
Part of free agency, right? Whereas in the past, it didn't really feel like they could. So I think there's some names that are out there that still make a lot of sense for them, some positions they could absolutely add some competition to, which brings us to our next question from Chris Saiz, who asks, what position should the Chargers target during the next wave of free agency? Well, they showed you the first one, and the first one was wide receiver after they took 3 wide receivers in the 2024 NFL draft. But I think it's a great question, David, because I do think there's a few positions here that I would still like to see some veteran competition to push some guys that are in key depth spots for this team.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we're probably going to have the same couple of positions here because it's not that big of a question. But I'm going to say safety is a position they could add. Someone you just mentioned in Justin Simmons. That would be crazy, but
sure,
I think they can
probably
add
not going to be Justin Simmons, but
there's
a lot of 10 plus free agent safeties out there that should be pushing JT Woods for a spot or AJ Finley for a spot, right?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't need to be Justin Simmons. That doesn't have to be a big name. But it's a position that should be added to.
Yeah, safety. The second one's guard for me. I think they need some competition in the middle of that offensive line. And then the edge position or the outside linebacker position. Those are all places where I feel like they could add some quality competition just to see who is able to make this team and make this team better and deeper.
Yeah, I mean, I would throw defensive line in there in a big way. I mean, defensive line is a place where you have, like, unless this regime and Joe Hortiz and Jim Harbaugh are willing to rest on their laurels, and like we've talked about before, that they aren't going to do with the receiver room, are you just going to expect Scott Matlock to make a big leap and be a huge contributor? Or are you going to just expect that Tito Abonia, after a banged-up year, is going to come in and contribute right away? Because right now you have a rotational defensive lineman in Poona Ford, who I like as the signing, for what they signed him for. And then you have a rookie in Justin Eboigbe, where we don't know what that's going to look like yet, right? You have Morgan Fox, obviously, and I mean, he's a name that you like, but a guy that obviously is more of a specialist, right? Yeah. He's a specialist in that way. So defensive line, I'd say, to go along with those other positions, and cornerback as well. Like, I mean, what part of the cornerback room do you think feels like solidified at this moment? Like, it just doesn't, right? Yeah. You have potentially Tarheeb Still and Jasir Taylor battling it out for the starting slot corner. You have Cam Hart and Dean Leonard battling it out for the next guy up as far as your outside corner, when you're hoping already for Christian Fulton to have a bounce-back season and Asante Samuel Jr. to be a good fit, when we obviously know he has flaws in his game. Yeah. So there's a lot of positions I think you could still add to, and I think we will see some of those positions to go along with edge rusher, and safety, and the ones that you brought up as well. But let's get to this next question from Nick here from Twitter, who asks, with Junior Colson having a huge head start with knowing the defense he's coming into, how possible do you think it is that he could break the rookie tackle record of 136 done by former 49er and Jim Harbaugh player Patrick Willis? David, do you think there's a chance?
I do think that there's a chance. Yeah, I really do. I mean, and breaking that down over a 17-game season, that's about 8 tackles per game. I do feel like that is attainable, especially if he's starting and he's playing the majority of the snaps in the middle. I think that is definitely attainable. I think there's, obviously there's games where there's been players that have had 10, 12, 13, 14 tackles. So you just have to average 8 tackles per game over a 17-game season. And I do feel like that's attainable. If you want to do it in 16, it's 8.5 tackles per game.
Right, and that's kind of where he has the leg up here, right? Because Patrick Willis obviously did it in 16 games. But it's also, like we talked about before, a number that a Luke Kuechly didn't surpass once upon a time, right? A number that Shaq Leonard didn't surpass once upon a time. So it's a big number, probably an unrealistic expectation. And I think the big thing here is just like more tackles obviously doesn't equal better play. So he could. Kenneth Murray had 100+ tackles, right? And it wasn't a year that we thought Kenneth Murray
It's not played. About how many tackles you get. It's where you're getting those tackles, right?
At the same time, I mean, this is a dude that averaged over 100 tackles in his last 2 years at Michigan, and on a Michigan team that didn't really need him to play in the fourth quarter very much. You know what I mean?
That's true.
A Michigan team he was getting some rest on. So I think he will be a tackle monster. We talked about it on the Buy or Sell show that we think he's going to be a day one starter for this team. So I think he's going to have a good chance to do it. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he eclipses 100, right? I think that's a very attainable number.
I'm with you on that.
Should be a starter. I mean, this is kind of the thing I think you would lean into his favor, right? Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen last year playing under Mike McDonald's defense, which is the closest thing to what Jesse Minter's defense is going to be.
Yeah.
Both had at least 133 tackles.
I like that.
Roquan Smith had, I didn't remember, it was 150 to 160. Patrick Queen was second on the team with 133.
That's crazy.
In a defense that Jesse Minter is running, right, with his own twist on it, a little bit different, obviously. Those linebackers make a ton of tackles.
Yeah.
So I think that would be
all over the field.
Right. That would definitely go in the column of, okay, hey, he definitely could have a chance at it. And I think the other thing I'd bring up is 14 players last year had over 137 tackles. So it's not as if, it's something that one or two guys
it's not like doing. It's not attainable, right?
Then again, that'd be pretty impressive if he's top 14 in the league as far as tackles as a rookie at a position that is incredibly hard to transition to the NFL level and the NFL speed and physicality and all those things. So the nice thing is, he's probably going to play all 17 games because even if he has 2 broken hands, he's still going to be out there anyways. And being a tackling machine with 2 clubs on his hands.
Crazy.
So excited to see what Junior Colson's going to be able to do. If he starts from week 1 and plays all 17 games, I think it's a number that's attainable. Is it too much to expect from a rookie? Probably, but we're both very high on him. So we do still do have some more Fan Mail Friday questions to get into, including a question from our friends over at the Chargers Chat Podcast, wondering if there's a different buzz this year after the draft with Joe Hortiz instead of Tom Telesco this year. And also a great question about which UDFAs on a preliminary basis do we think could have a good chance to make this roster. So we're getting into that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there is just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments when you work together to build up each other's boards. And the more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every single day because they are constantly changing tournaments and changing their challenges. A ton include their own unique minigames, and I love the minigames like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine, and there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something new to discover at Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. All right, David, well, we have more Fan Mail Friday questions to get into, including a question from our brethren over at the Chargers Chat Podcast. But I do want to tell everyone to make sure they're checking out the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 sports stream, giving you access to all sports every hour of the day with the experts that are covering their teams every single day, just like we are. And you just can't get analysis like that, especially on a 24/7 basis. So make sure you guys are going to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today. You can even see us on there every once in a while. But let's get to this question here from Chargers Chat. I don't know which one of the three guys it is. You know, is it the coach? Is it the Bulldog? I don't know. But they're asking us today. Chargers Chat Podcast, our brothers from different podcast mothers. How would you compare your general post-draft Telesco feelings to your post-draft Hortiz feelings? Bolt up. David, it's a great question. You know, I think you have to fight like just the new regime, right? Like, you know, it's always going to be exciting, and we were always hopeful, even after Tom Telesco draft classes.
Yeah,
let's be
always.
honest, right? There were more head scratchers. I think that's one of the biggest differences, but like, it is hard because it's like you're always excited. There's always hope there, but it does feel like there is a different kind of buzz this year with the Joe Hortiz draft class.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that there was always a few picks in every single draft with Tom Telesco that just made you scratch your head. It just didn't make sense, you know? Yeah. Obviously, like, Trey Pipkins has probably worked out better than, you know, most people would have expected, but he got picked in the third round from Sioux Falls, and nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, was expecting the Chargers to take him. Trey McKitty, another guy who was projected to be a 6th or 7th round pick, they took in the third round, and there's numerous other examples as well. But when it comes to Joe Hortiz, I just think that, you know, when you look at it, there's a rhyme and a reason for every single one of the draft picks. And I feel like that just gives you a lot of confidence that this is what the drafts are going to be like. Obviously, we only have one draft to pull from. So it's not exactly fair to compare 10 or 11 drafts versus one. But at least with the data that we have, I feel like with Joe Hortiz, that we have a general manager that's going to grab players that are going to be best player available to them, that are going to come in and they're going to have a reason why they picked those players.
Yeah, I mean, I think the third round stuff you brought up, you know, is very relevant. I mean, there's a couple hits in there. Like Trey Pipkins is one of the better third round picks that Tom Telesco had, right? But then there's the Chris Watts and the Max Turks, rest in peace, obviously. But like even JT Woods was a huge reach, right? Trey McKitty was a huge reach.
Yeah.
Trey Pipkins was a huge reach. And then Tom Telesco, after having a pretty good first couple of rounds this year, still couldn't help himself and had to take Delmar Glaze in the third round.
Great name.
Great name, but when you're taking the 150th ranked prospect, you know, at like the 70-something pick
in the third round,
it's hard to get excited about that. So I think there's less head scratchers, and I think there's just more of a feeling in this draft class that these might not all be starters or star players, but these guys are going to bring better depth, and there's going to be more singles in this draft class, and you're going to have less draft classes that look like 2022, right, where you have Zion and Jamari that are both starting from that draft class, and it's like, okay, those are fine. Maybe Jasir Taylor starts this year, but like look at every other pick from that draft class. You're not going to get a lot of contributors there, right? And even like with the guys I mentioned, like how many of those guys do we know are really, really good players? A lot of strikeouts in that draft class. So, I mean, 2021, same thing. You did great with the first three picks, you know, Rashawn Slater, Asante Samuel Jr., Josh Palmer, and then nothing. And then I think the other biggest difference is we talked about a theme, right? You feel something with this draft class. You feel the Chargers getting tougher. You feel the Chargers, you know, getting guys that fit what Jim Harbaugh wants to do. And you feel this team changing from what we know was a finesse team in the past to getting more blue collar, bring your lunch pail to work type of dudes. And I think that part of it's exciting too, because it just feels like the picks fit together. Like there's a theme to it. Like you said, more of a rhyme and a reason as well. So let's get to this next question here from Big Daddy E. And I know a lot of you guys want to know about the UDFAs. But guess what? We watched so much film during draft season. We're not going to watch a bunch of film on work nights this week. So we're going to save it for Monday and get into an undrafted free agent. So we're talking about some of our favorite guys from this undrafted free agent class. But I wanted to go over, at least in a preliminary way today, some of the guys that we like. So Big Daddy is asking, which undrafted free agent signees do you guys think have the best chance at making the final 53? As always, guys, thanks for the great content. Thank you, Big Daddy E, for always bringing us some great questions. And David, when you're looking at this, you're looking for positional needs and positional fits. Like, if you're a wide receiver, I'm probably not going to watch very much.
Sorry to break it to you.
Yeah,
it's going to be a tough one.
When there's 8 dudes already that we know are going to be at least the first 8, most likely 8 to make the team, and they're probably only going to keep 6. So when you're looking positionally, who are the guys that kind of made sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of the same positions that made sense for them to add in free agency, obviously. It's the guard, so to go through it, guard Carson Barnhart from Michigan. Obviously, that's a guy you have to bring up. Also, guard Willis Patrick from TCU. Guard center Bucky Williams from App State. And then the safeties, Akeem Dent from Florida State, Thomas Harper from Notre Dame, and then the outside linebackers to me, Savion Jackson from North Carolina State, and Tremont Morris-Brash from Central Florida. Those positions, guards, the centers, the safeties, the outside linebackers / edge players, those are the guys that I feel like have the best chance to go out here and try to make this 53-man roster for the Chargers.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, guard for sure, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're looking at what the Chargers have right now, I've said it before, like to think that you can go into this season knowing the struggles that Zion Johnson and Jamari Sawyer have, as hopeful as I am that those guys are going to figure it out and be much better, and I think they're in a better position now to improve under Greg Roman and Mike Devlin and these guys, right? To have no competition or legitimate competition for those guys is insane to me.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Even at backup center, right? Whether it's Jordan McFadden or Brendan Hymus, like Bradley Bozeman and then guys we don't know
then
what
who
they're going
yeah
to be.
There's
right?
got to be a
So,
backup, right?
I do think that you see that in how many interior guys that they brought in. But think about this, David. You brought up one of these guys. I don't even know if you realize the irony. The guard from TCU is named Willis Patrick. Who was Jim Harbaugh's best linebacker? Patrick Willis.
That's really funny.
That one blew my mind. I was like, wait a second. This name seems familiar. Willis Patrick? Like, I'm just going to write him in right now. I mean, he looks the part, too.
He definitely does.
I think
Bucky
Williams, another guy. Like, if those guys have some center guard versatility, I think it obviously helps both of them. Bucky Williams just looks like a theme the Chargers have been going after, too. Redheaded, big ginger dude, right? That looks like a
they got to have more redheads than anybody in the National Football
League. Why not back
League?
up your ginger center with a ginger undrafted free agent center potentially? I mean, I think the guy, we're talking about like power schools, like Akeem Dent is the one we will 100% talk about on Monday, especially given what the depth is at safety right now for the Chargers. So to see a Power 5 Florida State guy, with some pretty good testing numbers that they're bringing in undrafted free agency. I mean, he's one of the guys I would point to right away and say, okay, that guy is going to have a better chance than most to make this roster out of undrafted free agency, right? And I mean, if you're looking at those positions, those are the ones. Like the edge rushers, I don't know. I like I told you before, I do think there is going to be a time where they bring in a free agent edge rusher. Like, I just don't think you can let Chris Rump's only competition for that 4th spot be either undrafted free agent this year or former undrafted free agent. So, yeah, I think that's a spot that they'll add to still. And both of those guys, are like 5th-year seniors that never put up like ridiculous numbers. So, I'm sure they're going to get a chance, and we're hoping that this coaching staff gives everyone a chance. But those are the positions, right, that you would look at, and definitely some of the positions. Obviously, Carson Barnhart, a Michigan guy, right? Yeah. A dude that I think, played pretty much every position on the Michigan offensive line at one point or another.
Yeah, that versatility as an offensive lineman.
Right tackle, right guard.
It's definitely valuable.
And he's a Michigan guy, right?
Yeah,
so you feel like he's going to have a chance. But
wow.
Willis Patrick, besides being, Patrick Willis backwards, there's a lot of guys who look the part.
He's a monster.
I'm hoping for, the interior offensive line undrafted class to really, really push some of these guys who haven't been tested much on the Chargers interior in a place they could really, really add some depth. And if Jordan McFadden wins over those guys, great. Brendan Hymus wins over those guys, great. But you can't just be willing to go into the season without really testing and pushing those other guys you have right there. So make sure you guys are back here on Monday for our undrafted free agents. So when we actually have time to watch the players we're going to talk about, because that is so important for me and David, and we don't like talking about guys unless we have that requisite time. So to make sure you don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. You can also find the show every day on our social media. You can find us on Twitter at LockedOnLAC, and me on there at Dan Talk Sports, and David Drogmeyer at Dro Talk SD. And you can also find the show on Instagram at Locked On Chargers and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. If you guys want to get in a voicemail for the next fan mail show, we don't get enough voicemails. Leave a 30-second Chargers question at 323-524-7924, and a tier we will get you next week for sure. But make sure you guys are back on Monday for an undrafted free agent Monday, since we don't have mock draft Monday anymore. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.